You never know who you're truly standing across from. The person you mock, the one you dismiss as weak or insignificant, might be the one who holds the key to your most profound and painful lesson. This is a story about the day a man found that out in the most brutal and silent way imaginable. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever believed that true strength is quiet, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to our channel and join a community that finds power in the most unexpected stories. The setting was the Kenshin Dojo, a place that felt more like a sanctuary than a gym. Nestled on a quiet street in a sprawling American city, its walls were lined with the ghosts of discipline and decades of practice. The air itself tasted different inside, a blend of aged wood, sweat, and resolve. Here, the outside world's chaos was meant to be checked at the door, along with your shoes. The rules, etched on a simple wooden plaque, were clear: respect, discipline, humility. It was a bubble of order, presided over by Sensei Yamato, a man in his late 60s whose movements were as fluid and precise as water, and whose eyes held the quiet weight of 1,000 lessons taught. Into this world walked Mark. He was new, but he carried himself with the entitled air of a visiting champion. He was broad-shouldered, loud, and his presence felt like a splash of muddy water on a clean canvas. He hadn't come for discipline or self-improvement. He'd come, as he told a younger student named Leo during warm-ups, to learn how to really mess someone up. He saw the complex, centuries-old art of Shotokan karate as a mere collection of street fighting tricks, and he was here to collect the best ones. His opposite in every way was Anya. She was a constant, almost spectral presence in the evening classes. In her late 20s, with dark hair she always kept in a neat, practical braid, she was the embodiment of the dojo's principles. She spoke rarely, and when she did, her voice was a soft, measured cadence. She arrived exactly 10 minutes early, meticulously folded her street clothes, and began her warm-ups alone in a corner, her movements a silent prayer of stretches and controlled breathing. To the untrained eye, she might have seemed shy, even fragile, but to Sensei Yamato, and to anyone who understood the language of the body, her grace was a testament to a deep, ingrained power. Her stances were low and rooted. Her blocks were sharp and economical. Her strikes, though always pulled short of contact in practice, carried a focused intent that was palpable. Mark's targeting of Anya began subtly, with the currency of bullies everywhere, whispered comments, and condescending smiles. When she executed a perfect, powerful Gyaku-Zuki reverse punch, the ki shout that erupted from her was sharp and focused. Mark, standing nearby, snorted. "Nice yell," he muttered, just loud enough for her and a few others to hear. "Bet that's the most powerful thing about it." Anya didn't react. She simply completed her technique, her exhale smooth, her eyes forward, as if his words were nothing more than a gnat buzzing past her ear. This lack of reaction seemed to infuriate him more than any retaliation would have. Her silence was a wall he couldn't scale, a language he didn't understand. He began to test her more openly. During partner drills, if they were paired, he would apply excessive force, trying to knock her off balance. He would accidentally step on the edge of her mat. His comments grew more pointed, probing for a weakness that wasn't physical. "Where are you from, anyway?" He'd ask, his tone implying that her answer would explain her quiet nature. Anya would simply reply, "Hair," and return to her practice, her calmness a shield he couldn't penetrate. Sensei Yamato watched this slow-motion collision course with a heavy heart. He had seen Marks before, young men fueled by a toxic cocktail of insecurity and arrogance, who mistook violence for strength. He would pull Mark aside, his voice low and firm. "Mark-san, karate begins and ends with courtesy. Your power means nothing without control. Your strength is worthless without respect for your opponent." Mark would bow, a quick, perfunctory dip of his head, his eyes shadowed with resentment. He heard the words, but he dismissed them as the platitudes of an old man who had never been in a real fight. The fuse burned steadily for weeks. The other students, a diverse group of men and women of all ages who had found a home in the dojo's discipline, watched with growing discomfort. They saw the dedication in Anya's every movement. They saw the disrespect in Mark's. A silent solidarity formed around Anya, a protective bubble of unspoken respect. Leo, the young student Mark had first boasted to, started deliberately partnering with Anya during drills to shield her from Mark's accidental shoves. The dojo was choosing sides and Mark, in his arrogance, was too blind to see it. The humid Tuesday evening that changed everything began like any other. The sound of the city was a distant hum outside, but inside, the only sounds were the rhythmic calls of ich, ni, san, shi, and the soft, collective rustle of jizz. They were moving into jiukumite, free sparring. It was the part of class Mark relished, and most of the others approached with focused trepidation. Sensei Yamato looked over his students, his gaze lingering for a moment on Mark's aggressive posture and Enya's serene readiness. A decision seemed to crystallize behind his eyes. He was a teacher, and sometimes a lesson needed to be learned not from the sensei, but from the art itself. Pair up, he commanded. Mark-san, Anya-san, you will be partners. A palpable tension seized the room. The other pairings froze mid-bow. Leo shot a worried glance at Anya, but her face was, as ever, a calm mask. She simply bowed in acceptance and moved to her designated spot on the mat. Mark cracked his knuckles, a vulgar, popping sound in the respectful silence. He smirked, rolling his shoulders. Finally, a real challenge, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He stepped onto the mat, his stance wide and clumsy, all bluster and no foundation. Anya bowed to him formally, as was tradition. Mark gave a mockingly deep, slow bow, rising with a cruel smile. Ready to dance, quiet girl, he taunted, his voice low. Anya said nothing. She settled into her kama, her fighting stance. It was not aggressive, but perfectly balanced, her weight centered, her hands up, her gaze, zanshin, aware of everything, yet focused through him. Hajime. Sensei Yamato's voice cut through the air. Mark was a predator unleashed. He didn't circle, he didn't probe. He charged, his entire body committed to a single wild, looping right punch aimed directly at Anya's face. It was a barroom brawl move, telegraphed and fueled by pure malice. It was meant to humiliate and hurt. The collective intake of breath from the students was a sharp hiss. This was beyond breaking the rules of control. It was a violation of the dojo's very spirit. Anya didn't meet force with force. She flowed. As the punch came in, she shifted her front foot back a mere inch, her torso turning slightly. The fist whistled past her cheek so close it stirred the loose hairs at her temple. The move was so minimal, so efficient, it was devastating. Mark stumbled forward, carried by his own unchecked momentum, his punch hitting empty air. Confusion and a flicker of panic crossed his face. This wasn't in his script. Stop running, he roared, his ego now fully engaged. He launched a front kick, made Jerry aimed at her stomach. This time Anya's hands moved in a soft, blurring circle. Her left forearm swept down, redirecting the kick's force outward, while her right hand guided his leg past her hip. It was Nagashi Yuke, a flowing block. Mark stumbled again, hopping on one foot before crashing to one knee on the mat. The dojo was utterly silent now. The mockery had died in everyone's throats, replaced by a stunned, dawning realization. They were not watching a sparring match. They were witnessing a demonstration. Anya was a sculptor and Mark was her raw, unformed marble. Humiliation curdled into pure, unadulterated rage in Mark's eyes. He pushed himself to his feet, his face a blotchy red. The dojo, the rules, the sensei, it all faded away for him. He was in a primal space, his ego bleeding out on the mats. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You think you're better than me," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You and your quiet little act. You think you're too good for this place, for this country. Why don't you go back to wherever the hell you came from?" The words hung in the air, toxic and ugly. They weren't just an insult to Anya, they were a desecration of the space. Sensei Yamato stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. "No! The match is..." But Anya spoke. Her voice when it came was different. It was still quiet, but it was no longer soft. It was cold, flat, and carried the finality of a closing vault door. It silenced even the sensei. "You dare me," she said, her obsidian eyes finally locking directly onto Mark's. They were no longer the eyes of a student in a dojo. They were the eyes of a judge. "You want to see a real fight? For fun?" Mark, blinded by his fury and now emboldened by what he mistook for her finally engaging, sneered. "Yeah, I dare you!" "No more of this dance crap. Show me something real. Or are you and your whole kind just all talk?" Anya gave a single, slow nod. She took a deep, centering breath, and when she exhaled, she seemed to change density. The last vestige of the quiet student vanished. Her kami shifted into something lower, more primal, and infinitely more dangerous. It was no longer the textbook Shotokan stance. It was something older, something distilled and deadly. The energy radiating from her was no longer about defense or points. It was about ending a threat. Sensei Yamato, who had been about to physically intervene, froze. He saw the shift. He recognized the subtle positioning of her feet, the specific angle of her wrists. This was not the karate he taught. This was something else, something born from a much darker, more practical school of violence. He understood in that moment that a line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed with words. He gave a single, grim, almost imperceptible nod. He would let the art, in its rawest form, deliver the lesson. Mark, foolish to the last, misinterpreted the sensei's resignation for permission. With a guttural roar, he launched his final, desperate charge. He was a bull, blind and enraged. What happened next was so fast it was almost a subliminal flicker. It was not a flurry of blows. It was 3 precise, interconnected movements that unfolded in less than the time it takes a heart to beat. 1. Anya surged forward, not away, entering inside the arc of his wild punch. Her left forearm smashed into his bicep, a sharp, numbing strike that deadened his attacking arm. 2. Simultaneously, the fingertips of her right hand, fingers locked straight and rigid, speared into the soft, vulnerable area just below the center of his ribcage, the suigetsu or solar plexus. It was not a push. It was a piercing, penetrating thrust that delivered its force deep into his nerve center. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The roar died in Mark's throat, cut off as if by a guillotine. A soundless, choking gasp escaped his lips. His eyes widened into perfect circles of shock and agony, a silent scream as his diaphragm seized, paralyzing his lungs. The world of pain he suddenly inhabited was a silent, airless vacuum. 3. As his body instinctively folded forward around the epicenter of his pain, Anya's right leg swept back in a graceful, ruthless arc, hooking his lead ankle and lifting it cleanly. There was no force left in him to resist. He fell. It wasn't a dramatic crash, but a heavy, limp collapse, like a marionette with its strings cut. He hit the tatami mats with a dull, final thud. He lay on his side, curled into a fetal position, his body racked with silent, violent convulsions as it fought for a breath that would not come. His face turned from red to a terrifying shade of mottled purple. And the dojo went silent. This was not the quiet of concentration or respect. This was the silence of the abyss. It was a vacuum that swallowed all sound, all thought. The other students stood as statues, their minds unable to process the brutal, surgical efficiency of the takedown. It wasn't a victory, it was an annihilation. It was the quiet, devastating truth that had been living amongst them all along, revealed in 3 seconds of flawless, terrifying execution. Sensei Yamato was the first to move, kneeling beside Mark, his voice a low, steady murmur. "Breathe, Mark-san. Just breathe, it will pass." He looked up at Anya, and in his eyes there was no anger, no condemnation. There was only a deep, wary understanding and a profound, grieving respect. Anya stood over her vanquished opponent, her breathing already steadying. The weapon she had become was sheathed once more. The lethal intensity faded, leaving behind the familiar calm. But it was a calm that now seemed unapproachable, layered with a history no one in the room could possibly fathom. She looked down at Mark, not with gloating, but with a distant, almost clinical pity. He was no longer a bully, just a broken lesson. Then, she turned. She walked to the front of the dojo, to the showman, and bowed deeply, a long, respectful bow that was an apology and a reaffirmation of her respect for the art, if not for the failed vessel of it lying on the floor. She had defended the dojo's soul with a violence he understood, and in doing so, had sacrificed her place within it. She walked to the changing room, collected her bag, and left. The soft click of the dojo's front door closing was the loudest sound anyone had heard in minutes. She never returned. Mark, after several long, agonizing minutes, finally drew a ragged, wheezing breath. He was helped to his feet by Leo and another student, their hands under his arms. He could not look anyone in the eye. The arrogance, the swagger, the very core of his identity had been dismantled in 3 seconds. He gathered his things and left, hunched and broken. He, too, never came back. In the weeks and months that followed, the story solidified into legend. Sensei Yamato never spoke of it directly, but in later lessons, he would often talk about the dangers of ego, the true meaning of strength, and the importance of never, ever judging the quietest person in the room. The dojo had lost 2 students that night, but it had gained a powerful, permanent parable. The story of Anya is a reminder that the world is filled with silent rivers, running deep and powerful beneath a calm surface. It's a testament to the idea that the most potent forces are often the most restrained, and that dignity, when pushed beyond its limits, can become the most formidable weapon of all. That moment of silence in the dojo echoes through time, a powerful lesson in humility and the hidden strength that surrounds us every day. We tell these stories because they matter. They remind us of who we are and who we could be, and we want to hear from you. This story of hidden strength and a painful lesson learned in a dojo, where did it reach you? From which part of the country are you watching this video? Let us know in the comments below. Your story is part of ours. And if this resonated with you, subscribe for more journeys into the profound moments that define us.